I'm Lisa Ellen Smith, and this is Focus on Business. Today, we're going to talk about reopening the economy. Who can open? Who can't? How do you keep people safe? We're also going to check in on federal funding with the Small Business Association of Michigan. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to be talking today about reopening the economy again. There's very specific directives happening here in Michigan. So who is opening? What industries?
Well, this is something that we're going to have to keep a close eye on over the course of the coming weeks and ultimately, I think, the coming months. But what's already happened is starting to starting to accumulate, and so let's just review where we've come from, and then maybe talk a bit about where we might go from here. So first is critical infrastructure. Everybody knows critical infrastructure operations and businesses have been open all along. So think grocery stores and pharmacies and hospitals, things of that nature. There was just about a week ago, the governor issued another executive order which loosened up some of the rules and restrictions. Some of those things that were green lighted to operate at that time. Think outdoor professions like landscaping and nurseries and greenhouses, for example, storage facilities, but also some additional e-commerce, retail operations that previously had been closed, to the extent that they can take online orders, do curbside pickup or deliveries. Those have also been green lighted. So a pretty modest start. It's not a significant amount of the workforce, but a start to reopening. After that, the governor announced that on May 7th, construction would be back open. Now, we don't have all the details on what that means, if it's both indoor construction and outdoor construction. The governor did mention that it would be residential and commercial. So this will be a pretty substantial change, a very important step forward. So that's what we're looking forward to on May 7th. What we don't know is what else might happen, although there are some clues. If you look around, what are the other things that might happen before May 15th, which is when the current stay-home order expires. And a few industries come to mind that I think are potentials. Now, this is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, but I think potential is elective healthcare procedures. So a lot of healthcare right now is shut down, and it is putting a real strain both on the healthcare system itself and also on individuals that need important healthcare procedures done. Right now, it's mainly emergency procedures. Sometimes people heard that elective medical procedures have been stopped, and therefore that means cosmetic surgery, but that means way more than cosmetic surgery. So this is something I think is probably going to be in the nearer term compared to a lot of other industries. And then manufacturing. As you see some of the big manufacturers start to send some of their workforce into the factories to get them ready to restart. Very, very big job to start up a factory that has been idle. They wouldn't be doing that if they hadn't received some kind of indication that they're going to be green lighted to start operating pretty soon. So between now and May 15th, that's what I expect to have happen. Now you'll see other headlines. The legislature has passed some bills. Just want to remind people though that it requires the governor's signature for a bill passed to go into law. And so, for example, after May 15th, there was some legislative activity to restart things like bars and restaurants, theaters. And if that doesn't get the governor's signature, it doesn't go into law. It seems unlikely that it would receive the governor's signature based on the posture that we've seen come out of her office thus far. So really, those are the main things that we ought to look for in the near term. And but for no matter what business you're in, it makes sense to really start thinking about how do you get your business ready to reopen.
Well, I am very hopeful and cautious with everybody else. I ordered mulch for my yard today, which felt like I have a life. I can get back to work at my house anyway. So yes, I think cautious and hopeful are two really good words. When I think about cautious, that means we all have to think about being cautious as we open, not just manufacturing, but is the time to start to think about, how do I open my company? Regardless of who you are, you want to think about all of the things that have to happen. I happened to hop into one of the SBAM workshops, I think it was last week, and it was about reopening your company. One of the really big surprises that I found was the conversation about employees' morale and their state of mind and their sense of safety, physical safety, and safety against this virus. And they've got a lot of questions, and nobody wants to walk into that workplace the first day and not have heard something from leadership and management to know there is absolutely a plan in place. I really hadn't necessarily thought of that, but once people are all gathered at the door, piling into the office, it's a little too late to tell them, we've thought about this and we've got a plan in place. They've already congregated at the door. So that was just something that was eye-opening for me as an owner, but I'm sure there's far more than that to be thinking about. Rob, what is SBM doing around that back to work safety idea?
Well, thanks, Lisa. I do think it's going to look different for customers, for employees, for small business owners, part of what we're trying to do is a little bit of anticipation, but a little bit of understanding best practice, and to help members, to help small businesses all over the state begin to, as you just said, to not only communicate about being safe, but actually put new procedures into place to make their workplace as safe as it can possibly be, and really to put employees at ease that it is truly a safe place to be. We've been sort of thinking this in four pillars, if you will, four areas that you really have to be paying attention to. I think PPE, personal protective equipment, is going to be very common. I think when you walk into a workplace, you're going to see people with face coverings. You're going to see people with gloves in some cases, depending upon what the business is. So that kind of personal protective equipment will become common, but that really is something that employers got to have to think about. What do I need to provide my employees to make certain it is safe to be in our workplace? Disinfectant, hand sanitizer, and those sort of things are a big piece of that. And that really is a second pillar, is sanitation or disinfecting. I mean, thinking about those public places where people touch, making sure they're regularly washed down, the place where door handles and elevator buttons and places where people put their hands on a regular basis, to make certain that there is real attention given to that. So the second pillar is sanitation, disinfecting those public places. The third is distancing, and to be really serious about employees working next to each other, to put some space in between them. The meetings, as we might have known them, may look different for a while, where there truly is space between people and customers. If you have people come into your business and stand in line, you really have to give them a sense of 6 feet, whether that's marked out on the floor or some queuing guidance, so that people can in fact stand apart from each other. And so to be really serious about distancing. And then I think the fourth thing is health screenings. It will be fairly common to be asked a series of questions when you first come to work in the morning, potentially even have your temperature taken, and just have you had a fever? Have you been around people who are sick? And the answers to those questions are going to be really important as to whether someone is going to be allowed to work that day, because it's really going to be important to make certain that sick people aren't in the workplace and are truly sort of separated. And then do those things first, and then communicate with people, with your employees in particular, about the precautions you've taken and the things you've done. Now, we just released what we call the Small Business Owner's Guide to Getting Back to Work Safely. And it lists these things that I've just mentioned, and even some places you could go for PPE, and just trying to make it as easy and straightforward as possible for small business owners to think through what it means to them and their workplace to be safe.
Rob, have we said what PPE is? I think we should probably define that.
It is personal protective equipment. Yeah, we tend to use this term now. I think the term is going to become fairly common, but personal protective equipment, it describes a category of things like face coverings and gloves, face shields, some of the things that we'll see more and more now.
Yeah, and just having those 4 pillars is important. And then the details around what's going to happen with those. For example, wearing a face mask. I'm seeing a lot of people out in the public with a face mask that stops here. So it's not brought over their nose and it's not sealed around their nose and that, basically you might not really be wearing one at that point because you're not covering your nose. So there's going to be some more guidelines that have to happen here. What are some of those things that are going to be, Brian, what are you seeing also that's going to be different? Why don't you weigh in here?
Yeah, I think that we're going to get a lot more guidance on specifics. Just not too long ago, there was an additional executive order on food service, and that was rather explicit about the use of a face covering that covered both your nose and your mouth, just as an example. So as these guidelines get put into regulations, that's when we'll really get to the heart of what the practices have to be. But I wouldn't expect those practices to be all that different from what the OSHA standards are today, that the occupational safety organization or agency that we look to already for the standards that are required of business owners. So yeah, there's regulations to come, but we kind of know what they're likely to look like. But there's also a legislative agenda that is going to be very important. That as we start easing back into work here, and we have more and more of the workforce heading back to work, there are certain things that are going to be on business owners' minds. One of those things is how liability works, and that maybe certain practices that could be safe harbor practices that protect a business or a business owner from liability. Because we know whether you stay home or you go to work, this virus is going to be with us for a while. There's going to be some risks associated with it. And so if we're not careful about this and you go back to work, the assumption might be, well, the person went back to work, and if they got sick, it must have happened at work. When the truth is that work is going to be one of the most regulated places that a person is in their life. Work is going to be the place where they probably have the most attention to the practices that keep you safe from the virus. So liability protections is something that we're going to have to take a close look at. Another thing is how workers' compensation works. We know for certain types of professions, like in the healthcare industry, when you're treating a patient who is infected, that if you become infected yourself, likely you know that happened at work. But if you're a landscaper, for example, and or you cut lawn on your own, well, if you get sick, then it's not necessarily a reasonable presumption to say, yep, that must be a workers' compensation claim. Another part of the legislative agenda that's going to be important to develop over the coming months is how the regulations are standardized. We saw as the shutdown happened that different counties had different rules, and that's hard enough when you're shutting down. But when you're trying to get going again or starting to operate again, it's going to be very important for the rules to be standardized across the entire state. That we don't have people trying to operate according to one set of rules where you picked up the load and a whole other set of rules where you dropped off the load if you're in the logistics business, for example. there's going to be some need for standardization. So those are some of the issues that we're thinking about and looking toward developing a longer term overall game plan for how we successfully re-engage in the economy.
I would imagine too, there's going to have to be some thought given to person by person returning to work. There are people of different ages at different risk categories. There are people with underlying health risks. I have asthma, for example. I don't know if that puts me more at risk. It's not that bad, but if I feel like I can't go to work because I'm 26 years old and I have asthma, now where is the liability there? Somebody's going to have to be able to give us some guidelines about what can and can't happen in these instances. So I think it's going to be a lot of discussion and I guess the promise here is SBM is going to continue to follow this back to work conversation and report back in. Can we count on that?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a big part of what we do, and it's we don't make this stuff up as we go. It really comes directly from business owners. That we're a member-driven organization. Small business owners in every industry you can think of across every county, in literally every county in the state, 28,000 members strong. That's the input process for the work that we do. So as we carry that message forward and what needs to happen for that backbone of our economy, small businesses, to be successful in the future, that it comes from the ones who make our communities go, the main job creators, the job providers in our society, in every little town to every big town across the landscape.
And just as because I like to, set people's mind, small business is defined as 500 employees or less. Is that correct?
That's how the United States Small Business Administration defines small business, and so qualification for certain assistance from the federal government is tied to that 500 employees or less threshold. Our members tend to be smaller than that, so over 90% of our members have fewer than 100 employees. So truly, truly small businesses, and that's what we do. That's who we represent.
Yeah, and there's a ton of us, and thank you for advocating for us and being there for us. And we have to stay in business in all of this. We're in this incredible window of time that's going to burn into our brains as a whole generation, this moment in time. And the biggest thing we need to do is stay in business. So let's wrap up a little bit here with what's happening with federal funding, the Paycheck Protection Program loans. Rob, do you have any updates for that?
Well, yes. We're starting to hear more and more, I guess, good news about the Paycheck Protection Program. This is the program that we're really encouraging every small business in the state to take a look at. Could make a difference whether you survive this thing or not. It's the $350 billion in the first round that the Congress put forward as a loan that is forgivable if you spend it on certain things, payroll primarily, rent and utilities. If you spend it on those things, it becomes a grant in effect to you. And so we're really encouraging small businesses to take a look. The money ran out. The first $350 billion didn't last very long, but a second round has come. It's $310 billion. And we're hearing more and more stories of people who have been since Monday in line and getting funding. So I would simply say, if you are a business owner right now, you haven't received any word about Paycheck Protection Program, A, if you haven't heard about it, you need to pay attention, and B, if you are not getting any answers or you feel like you're standing in line, there are small community banks right now that have capacity. There are willing to take applications, and you might also look at what are called community development finance institutions, CDFIs, which are kind of non-bank organizations who also will have capacity. You can find a list of those on our website if you want to know who might be a CDFI in your area. That's at sbam.org. So a little more information about that. I would also say the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is the other important one to take a look at. That is directly through the SBA, up to $2 million. The first 10,000 of this, if you have at least 10 employees, is also a grant. It's an advance. And so the EIDL is another thing that we're watching. Ran out of money the first time, was refunded with $60 billion. And that is a lot of money, but it will also go fast. So we're just really encouraging any small business in the state to look at those two in particular, the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program.
Can any small business go after both of those, or are they differentiated in some way?
Any business can go after both. Our guidance is you just simply can't spend it on the same thing. So, for example, the Paycheck Protection Program is a forgivable loan, but it's pretty narrow in how it has to be spent. The EIDL is a broader loan. Not only 10,000 of it is forgivable, so it would be for a loan, a payback period. It's pretty patient and it's really good terms, but you could use that for different things. And so we are advising you could take a look at both. You can do both. You just need to be smart about how you spend it.
Well, thank you. That's a great update. Sounds like there's money out there, which is good news for small business. I am interested to know how well Michigan does in all of this. We've had a lot of support with small business with you folks and many others. What else is happening at SBAM? How do I stay on top day by day?
Well, I would simply say one of the things we're doing is we're spending all of our time as a staff focusing on helping small businesses navigate this issue. Nothing else but that. All of it kind of focused on in a couple of areas. A daily briefing we do at 3 o'clock every single day. You can find us on Facebook at Facebook Live, and then our website. The website is constantly updated and curated just for small businesses, and we would encourage members to go there at sbam.org.
Rob, Brian, thank you for being here today.
Zoom was in the news again this week, not because of some security issue, but because they threw out some crazy number of 300 million participants on their platform in a single day. What this means is that a lot of these people are novices or beginners or people that haven't used the platform before. From an attacker, a cyber attacker's perspective, this is a very ripe field. Okay, so Zoom has been under attack with phishing emails. A new one came out this week that was looked like someone needed to log in. So here's some credentials, put your credentials in here. And it looked like it was real from Zoom. So for a novice user, they might do that. That would be bad because now they have stolen credentials and someone can act as them while they're in the platform. The FTC, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security have all issued warnings, not just about Zoom, but other phishing emails that relate to this pandemic. There's been a 300, or one researcher reported some crazy number, like a 30,000% increase in pandemic-related cyber attacks during this 2-month period, February and March. 30,000%. I don't even know what that means, 30,000. It's a gigantic number of an increase, all related to pandemic type stuff. We've seen roughly 72,000 domain names now that have the words coronavirus or COVID-19 somewhere in their name. Now, not all of these are malicious, but many of them could be. We see 700 to 800 apps in the App Store with the words coronavirus or COVID-19 somewhere in their name. So you have to be careful. This is the whole thing. These cyber attackers are taking advantage of people that haven't worked from home and are susceptible to these phishing attacks. So from a business owner or business management perspective, you need to do the right thing. You need to get your people educated. You might say, well, they're smart, they're not going to click on this stuff. But you know, the tremendous increase in these attack attempts, and it only takes one. It only takes one user to have one moment of a breakdown and what you might think, hey, why did you do that? That was really dumb to do, but it happens, okay? We see it all the time. So you need to have, and not just say it once, but say it over and over and over again. You need to build a culture of cybersecurity within your organizations, and that occurs with repeating the message, repeating. So take the opportunity this week to share with your staff, your family, your loved ones to pay attention to these COVID-19 or coronavirus-related phishing attacks. They're everywhere, and it only takes one to cause a problem. Do those things, and you'll stay safe out there.
Focus on Tech, brought to you by Providence, making technology easier.
Denise Policella, and today on Focus on Legal, we're going to talk about selling your business post-pandemic. Now, whether you've suffered financial losses or you've just decided this is a great time to move on, let's talk about selling your business in a way that is the most profitable and least risky to you. Here are a few tips. First, do an honest evaluation of your business. That may not include the sweat equity you put into it, but it's not just your net profit either. It will also include things like intellectual property you've developed, goodwill and customer lists, your talent pool, and your trade fixtures. Have a good idea of your asking price in mind so that you can go into these negotiations knowing what your business is really worth, keeping in mind that you're going to be able to sell your business only for what somebody else is willing to pay for it. Also think about structuring. If you're going to insist that your buyer cashes you out at closing, you're going to have to lower your purchase price. Therefore, you should consider allowing your buyer to finance the deal so that you can get the most bang for your buck. It's also incredibly important that you engage an attorney experienced in business transactions. For the amount of money that you pay for an attorney to start and get you through this process, you will reap the rewards on the back end because you will not have as much risk from adverse or ambiguous language that could land you in court or cost you money after the contract is already signed. Finally, and most importantly, never ever do a handshake deal for the sale of your business. These transactions must be in writing for everyone's protection and especially yours. If you are dealing with a buyer who refuses to sign a written letter of intent, move on. They're not serious. Remember, always engage an attorney before you make any big moves, and good luck with your future endeavors.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Policella and Associates, PLLC.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next Sunday.